Good morning to our viewers on Parliament Channel 11, Parliament Radio 105.5 FM, and also those who are streaming us live on our YouTube channel, ParlView, and to the members of the media gathered with us here today. My name is Atiba Wilshire, and I will be the moderator for today's press conference, which is being put on by the Joint Select Committee on State Enterprises. The committee has decided to do this press conference to update the general public on the findings of 3 reports done by the committee. These reports are, firstly, the 8th report of the committee on an inquiry to examine the operations of the National Quarries Company Limited. Secondly, the 9th report of the committee on an inquiry into the operations of Evolving Technologies and Enterprise Development Company Limited, or TecK. And thirdly, the follow-up to the 5th report of the committee on an inquiry into the administration and operations of Caribbean Airlines Limited. Before we proceed, please allow me to introduce the members of the committee who are with us today. I'll begin with the chairman, who is seated at the center, Chairman David Small. To the chairman's right is committee member Wade Mark. To Mr. Mark's right is committee member Adrian Leonce. To the chairman's left is committee member Fazal Karim, and to Mr. Karim's left is committee member Brigadier General Ansel Antwine. At this time, we'll hand over to the chairman, Chairman David Small, to update us on the findings of the reports.
Thank you very much, Atiba, for the kind introduction. I want to say thank you to the members of the viewing and listening audience who've joined us today. I want to thank the members of the press who are here to cover this event. I want to start off today. The chairman has a very relatively simple job today, but given that this is the last bit of work that this committee is doing in this part of the parliamentary session, I want to put on record my appreciation as chairman for the support I've received from every member of this committee. This committee has undertaken quite a heavy schedule of work in between all of the work we're doing, and I think that we've tried to apply our best efforts in terms of getting the work done. I also want to put on record the committee's appreciation for the work of the support team from the Parliament, who have been unstinting and very, very hardworking in their efforts in trying to keep us online. And in terms of getting all of the work done and keeping us on schedule, they've done the usual tremendous job. This morning, we have 3 members of the committee who are unfortunately absent, so you have 5 of us here. These committees, as most persons are aware, comprise 8 members. The structure of the meeting this morning, the press conference, I will be doing some brief introductory remarks, and then we'll go straight into the presentation of the recommendations and final reports, beginning MP Leonce to my extreme right will be doing the coverage of the TecK report. Senator Mark will be doing the report on the National Quarries Company Limited. To my left, MP Karim will be doing the report on Caribbean Airlines Limited. Both myself and the Brigadier will be here to add additional commentary, because there's inside of the reports, and you have really clear recommendations, but several issues still arise that we've determined that still additional commentary is required. So I just want to say, as a general overview, this committee has observed over the period of time a pattern of incidences or challenges from state enterprises, where it seems that the understanding of the word accountability hasn't sunk in. People are in charge of state resources and don't seem to understand that those resources belong to the people of Trinidad and Tobago, and they should apply an appropriate duty of care in managing those resources. It's almost we try not to cast aspersions, but you get a view sometimes that people feel entitled to be able to do what they want to do with state resources, and that is not on. one of the other key challenges that we've noted and we're very deeply concerned about, the oversight body for this whole state enterprises sector is a unit of the Ministry of Finance called the Investments Division. And to the best information that we have, they're woefully under-resourced. Woefully. On the books, there are probably around 100 state enterprises. The issues as to whether that is an appropriate number are way above our pay grade. But you have an entity that is woefully under-resourced to manage this, and they essentially do work post facto. After things happen, then they find out about it, and then they try to figure out what happened, as opposed to having these activities in terms of monitoring the activity of these enterprises in real time. And they need support to get it done. I have some clear views on it, but the committee hasn't crystallized all of its thoughts on that matter. But certainly we believe that on the basis of what we have in front of us, the investments division is woefully under-resourced, and urgent action needs to be taken to deal with that. The other issue is the state enterprises performance monitoring manual. Again, we've noted from several entities that we've reviewed, not only these, but in the most recent past, that entities seem to not understand that while the manual itself is a guiding document, and we're expecting entities to apply the rules and procedures in there, a lot of times you find that entities just simply ignore it, don't act as if it doesn't exist, and do their own thing. And part of the challenge with that is because the document doesn't have legal force. It doesn't have any penalties. And that is something that we are hoping that those who are at pay grades much higher than ours can apply some effort to try to put some military precision behind how that is supposed to work. So those are the few opening remarks, because I believe that increasingly Trinidad and Tobago is witnessing some, what I would call embarrassing or potentially unethical behavior from people who are in senior positions in state enterprises. And when there's a failure to hold these officials to account, when they go rogue, have misconducted themselves, or in our view, have taken actions that run counter to the public interest, we are trying to figure out who's really responsible for bringing those persons to book. The committee can only do so much. What the committee has been able to do is to at least put on the public record some of the misdeeds or the poor decisions that have been taken by parties inside of these state enterprises. But it requires a holistic approach. In order to fix these problems, the committee can only go so far into identifying what the problems are, recommend things that can be done to fix those problems, but it requires a holistic approach to fix the system. And this is what we are still working on. So that is the sum and substance of my opening remarks. I want to thank you for bearing with me. We will now go straight into the presentation of the findings and reports beginning with TecK, and I will ask MP Leons to my extreme right to take the floor. MP Leons.
Thank you, Chair. This report that we are going to talk about now would be based on the examined operations of the evolving TecKnologies and Enterprise Development Company Limited. Our general findings were, 1, the overall performance of the parks and the Hilton Hotel assets have been profitable, though possibly not optimal. However, the losses of the Intech Park and the Magdalena Grand Beach and Golf Resort have completely undermined these gains. The Magdalena Grand has been operating at a loss since it opened in 2012. The challenges undermine the achievements of TecK's mandate. 1, the cessation of the PSIP funding. 2, the unfavorable economic conditions. 3, marketing and tenanting of the Intech Park. Impending sale of assets. Increasing age and debt portfolio. Collection of outstanding arrears. Portfolio of age leases. Acquisition of head leases for state lands vested in TecK. In order to address the primary challenges listed above, TecK has developed a strategic plan 2018 to 2022 that focuses on 8 strategic initiatives. 1, the customer care. 2, the financial self-sufficiency. 3, hotel asset optimization. 4, industrial business park assets optimization. 5, real estate asset development. 6, people development. And 7, stakeholder management and technology improvement. Additionally, in the past 3 years, TecK has done the following to eliminate wastage and duplication: the consolidation of the facilities, maintenance, and industrial parks into one department, budgeting process focus on critical works to address HSSE issues and enhance revenue for hotel assets. Some staff vacancies were deferred and priority given to most critical positions. Relocation of TecK's head office to flagship complex in the TecK Park. The in-house legal handling of matters, example, the preparation of execution of leases and court appearances. Use of the in-house technical experts as opposed to consultants. The use of value for money-based approaches in tendering processes. TecK's main achievements for fiscal 2016-2017 were: 1, development of new economic zones and parks, obtaining the statutory approvals for Point Fortin Light Industrial Park, the commencement of design works for the Moruga Agro-Processing and Light Industrial Park, Tamana TecK Park. They completed roof repairs to south side and the south block of the flagship building. They completed an assessment of works and cost requirements for the completion of the Alutech facility. Industrial parks infrastructure, new signage was installed to all industrial parks. Completed road repair works to some of the industrial parks like Bilger, Harmony Hall, Mova, Sealots, and City. Completed paving of the Milford driveway. Completed drain repair works at Bilger, Harmony Hall, and Pleasance industrial parks. Installed wire wall fence at the Point Lisas industrial parks. Hotel assets. Developed and issued RFP to hire consultants who will assist in appointing a steering committee, long-term operator or brand manager for the Magdalena Grand Hotel and Golf Resort. Developed and issued an RFP for procurement of an operator for the hotel located at the National Academy for the Performing Arts on behalf of MTI. Completed upgrade of fire alarm systems of the Magdalena Hotel. New system installed and commissioned and fully functional. Completed repair works to chillers and cooling towers at the Magdalena Grand Hotel. Tendered and subsequently engaged a consultant for the design services and detailed costing for the construction of beach and coastal protection works, including a breakwater. Installation of demountable walls in the ballroom of the Hilton Hotel and Conference Center was completed. Design works completed for the upgrade and pool and deck works of the Hilton Trinidad. Construction works are ongoing. Others were completed consolidated audited financial statements for 2015 and 2016, a completed draft of new strategic plan, a review and reorganization of the company's organizational structure, administrative and legal work with respect to arrears, tenants, on hold and leases, increase revenue through aggressive debt collection. In support of the achievement of the government policy objective and outlined by the Ministry of Trade and Industry, TecK focus over the next 5 years will be completing and fully operating phase 1 of the Tamana TecK Park, providing necessary support to invest TT as it seeks to market and tenant TIP as per its directive, collaborative with the MTI, InvestTT, and other ministries, state agencies, bodies for the provision of infrastructure and technical assistance to local and foreign investors to ensure business have the right tools to operate successfully. Upgrade of all existing industrial estate parks. Establish new park economic zones for agro-processing, mixed-use and industrial parks in designated new growth areas throughout Trinidad and Tobago. Operationalize the Point Fortin Business Park. Advocate for state lands and other invest necessities for commercial development, and conduct capital works on state-owned hotels. The committee came up with a summary of recommendations. 1, in light of financial vagaries of the 99-year lease arrangements, the TecK should engage in dialogue with clients to renegotiate the terms of their lease arrangements so they become more relevant to the current economic context, as well as take account of ever-increasing value of land assets. 2, as an outcome of this dialogue, TecK should seek to make all of the existing 99-year leases non-assignable, thereby preventing existing tenants from transferring to other parties without first engaging TecK with TecK either on a new contract or a shorter period, if continued, on terms and conditions that reflect current and forecast market conditions. 3, despite the profitability of the majority of TecK's industrial parks, TecK should ensure that its current rental rates across the industrial parks are economically viable and allow for market-based adjustments so as to maximize profits. 4, in light of the challenges being faced with the profitability of the Magdalena Grand Hotel, TecK should endeavor as soon as possible to complete negotiations with a new hotel management firm with more favorable contractual terms that allow for optimal risk sharing between TecK and the management firm. 5, additionally, a careful analysis should be conducted under the constituents part that make up the Magdalena operating costs, so as to identify measures that may be taken to contain same. 6, despite the profitability of the Hilton asset, TecK should, via comparative and other analysis, review the contractual arrangement between Hilton and TecK to ensure that the existing terms of arrangements are equitable to both parties. 7, collaboration geared towards the optimal tenanting of the Tamana Intech Park must be a key area of emphasis to ensure that the asset begins to provide a reasonable and steady return on the significant investment in its establishment. TecK should ensure that it conducts a regular review of the RevPAR, which is the revenue per available room, for the hotel assets to assess their performance against other hotels in the same group, in the Hilton group, and other similar regional hotels. TecK should embark upon a detailed analysis of the operating costs of the Magdalena Grand in order to ensure that the operation model chosen places sufficient emphasis on keeping costs firmly under control. 10, in addition, given the excellent cost management seen from the Hilton Trinidad operation, TecK should analyze whether there's any lessons learned that can be applied to the Magdalena Grand. 11, in addition to the work conducted by CBRE, when assessing the prospects for the Magdalena Grand, TecK should ensure that there is a full and proper engagement of Tobago stakeholders, given the initial options placed on the table by the consultant. And finally, 12, TecK should consider placing a register online of all its existing acreage listings and locations, size, terms of leases, and whether available or occupied, so as to make public the real state of its tenancy of its holdings.
Thank you very much, MP Leons. I want to draw to members' attention in particular. The committee spent a lot of time with ETEC. ETEC has these 99-year lease arrangements. And what the committee has recommended at recommendations 1 and 2 is that you can open the discussion. Just because you have a 99-year lease doesn't mean you just sit back and wait for it to expire. You should be able to have a discussion with tenants and say, we may have signed this 10 years ago, but given the current economic situation, the current valuation of these assets, this may not be in the best interest. Can we have a discussion about how we can look at this arrangement and amend this arrangement? And one of the key recommendations we have in there also is about not allowing somebody, let's say, who was on 99-year lease, after 20 years, passing it on to someone else, a family member or a business partner, to continue with terms that are 25 years old. Yeah, so that they should try to make sure that they can't do it unilaterally. We are recommending that they open the discussion to try to make sure that these leases, because some of these estates are sitting on relatively prime land, and land tends to only appreciate in value. So when someone is sitting on a 99-year lease and paying really peppercorn rates, in some cases, really, really low rates, we are recommending that we try to optimize the value that returns to the state. The other key thing I just want to flag is regarding the Magdalena Grant. The Magdalena Grant has an unusual cost operating structure that the cost structure something seems wrong with it. Which is why we recommended that they do essentially a deep dive into the costs of the operation. Because when you compare it to Hilton, it doesn't compare favorably at all. The cost structure of the operating cost for Magdalena something seems skewed. And we're not sure as to the exact causes of that, but we've recommended that they look at that, because when you compare how the costs are managed, in particular employee and personnel costs, the way in which the Hilton documents are presented, that cost is very much under control, as opposed to Magdalena. It seems to be growing every year. And when you compare it to the revenue and other things, it's way, way, way off. The final thing I want to flag regarding the ETEC is that the ministry, ETEC had engaged a consultant to do some work to make recommendations as to what could we do to improve the Magdalena Grant. And some of the initial recommendations are around changing the business model of Magdalena Grant. The name of it suggests Magdalena Grant. And the initial view of the consultants is that may not necessarily be the branding that you're looking for, and if you really want to attract business to the hotel. It may require a rebranding of the approach to the hotel, in terms of, rather than it being this huge attempt at a 4-star hotel, you may have to, if you really want the thing to be operating in a way with high occupancy, turning over revenue on an ongoing basis, on a steady basis, you may have to review the model. Reviewing the model, of course, would have other impacts. So that this is why we recommended that in any decision that's been taken, that proper and full and early consultation with the Tobago stakeholders is absolutely critical before any type of decision is taken, or once they have the recommendations on the table, please engage with the Tobago stakeholders, because we don't want it to appear that ETEC is taking decisions without having a proper consultation with the stakeholders. So, and the last thing I want to highlight, again, the committee has a view about transparency. If you are a citizen, you're trying to understand where ETEC has open lots, you have to literally walk into their building and find out. That is where in 2018, that information should be easily available somewhere on their website or some kind of portal, where someone who's interested in doing some type of business should be able to go and find that information. And then, depending on where it is, then they could come and indicate their interest. As it is now, you have to go in there and probably go through a process to find out what is available. And we believe that where in 2018 there's enough technology available to treat with that. So those are my additional comments. I now wish to pass on the floor to Senator Mark, who will be presenting on our general findings and our recommendations on our review of the National Quarries Company Limited. Senator Mark, you have the floor.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. And good morning to members of the media. First of all, National Quarries Limited, you should be aware, is a state-owned company which was set up by the government in February of 1979. And the main objective of this company, which was set up at the time, was to rationalize the supply of aggregate to the construction sector at the lowest possible economic price to facilitate major development projects either in progress or earmarked for startup. It is to be noted that we embarked upon this inquiry to deal with a couple main concerns and objectives. First of all, to understand the structure of this company and how it is managed. We also wanted to determine the policy objectives being achieved through the existence of this particular company. And finally, to determine whether National Quarries is satisfying transparency and accountability principles. Based on at least 2 hearings and some 6 written submissions, 3 from National Quarries, 2 from the Ministry of Energy and Energy Industries, and 1 from the Trinidad and Tobago Extractive Industries Transparency Initiative, the committee was able to advance the following findings. 1, the primary challenges identified by the board and executive management of this organization were: 1, a legacy debt of $85 million. 2, impaired plant and equipment. And 3, employee competencies are less than adequate due to a historical trend of ineffective recruitment or hiring practices. Another finding had to deal with the outsourcing of several areas of the company's operations, which amounted to some 58% of the company's operating costs. These areas were crushing and processing of limestone, haulage, blasting, rental of mining equipment, and security. All of these were outsourced by this organization or company. Another finding is that this company has not made a profit since 2009. And based on submissions dated January 10, 2018, the company does not maintain information concerning the total market size or even the National Quarries market share, which is almost unbelievable. Another finding was that as of the 31st of March 2017, National Quarries outstanding royalties to the state, the people, the government for sand and gravel at its Tory operations, they owed $38,022,354.50. And at its limestone operation at Scott's Quarry, they owed the state $10,207,048.24. Another finding was that the National Quarries, as at the 16th of February, had 11 ongoing litigation matters at an accumulated cost of $981,016. Another finding was that the supplier and contractor relationship were severely eroded or almost non-existent due to poor payment practices on the part of this company called National Quarries. Another finding was that the government, we were told, made it very clear to National Quarries it was not in a position to provide any financial assistance to that company. We were told, and that is one of the findings, that the National Quarries is expected to attain profitability as at the end of financial year 2018. We look forward to that. The company remains concerned that despite being in existence since the committee remains concerned that despite being in existence since 1979, National Quarries does not possess the capacity to fulfill its mandate. Now, I mentioned the Ministry of Energy and Energy Industries. They are responsible for overseeing that organization called National Quarries. Here what the findings were concerning this ministry. Of the 67 mining operators on record, only 6 were operating with current licenses. So there were almost 61 mining operators who were operating without licenses in Trinidad and Tobago under the watch of the Ministry of Energy and Energy Industries. The state loses large sums in the form of unpaid or uncollected royalties. And the following challenges were listed. For example, there are a number of established positions to be filled. There are inadequate vehicles and drivers, and there is no formal enforcement unit to take enforcement action against violators of the quarry industry, and there are many of them on the compound of National Quarries and its environs. Some of the recommendations that we wish to advance arising out of these findings are as follows. It is the view of this Joint Select Committee that the outsourcing of 58% of this company's operating costs should not continue. Therefore, we are proposing that the company build in-house capacity in the following areas: blasting, crushing, and processing activities. We believe that National Quarries should sharpen the pencil on contract terms as it relates to their contractors who they outsource a lot of functions to. And that should be done at a competitive cost. We believe also that National Quarries should urgently engage the Ministry of Energy to agree to a strategy to boost its capacity and optimize output. Another recommendation is that National Quarries should continue its strategic emphasis on the rationalization of costs, production optimization, and sales target. It is another recommendation focuses on research and development. There should be a strategic emphasis on research and development in the current mining market in order to develop suitable strategies in support of its mandate to become the market leader in the aggregate industry. Another recommendation deals with National Quarries working in collaboration with the Ministry of Energy to urgently commission a study to establish the status of the local aggregates market in terms of its size, the number of players, and their respective shares. Believe you me, we do not have that appreciation as we speak. Another recommendation is that National Quarries must maintain a more reliable database of private mining operators so as to provide the necessary data so that more informed assessment of the industry can be made. There is need to adjust the National Quarries mandate so that we can relate that to the maintenance of the price of aggregates, and this should include competitive pricing. There should be a study done on lease mining rental rates by National Quarries with a view to proposing an upward adjustment in the existing $250 per hectare rate. Another recommendation that we wish to advance is that a study should be done in collaboration with the Ministry of Energy to review the existing royalty rates and a proposal made to the Ministry of Finance for an updated, competitive, business-sensitive adjustment. National Quarries should urgently engage with the Ministry of Energy to agree on a plan to clear the company's indebtedness to the state as it relates to outstanding royalty payments. And very importantly, the Ministry of Energy and Energy Industries should strongly lobby for the miscellaneous provisions illegal mining bill to be given priority attention at the level of the LRC, which is a Legislative Review Committee, and brought to Parliament before the end of 2018. There is too much illegal mining and quarrying taking place in Trinidad and Tobago, and there is no legal framework to deal with those illegal mining operators in our country. And therefore, the committee is recommending that there is, in fact, draft legislation to deal with illegal mining at the level of the LRC. We are saying in this recommendation that should be brought to Parliament before the end of this year. We are also proposing that the Ministry of Energy should urgently address the sluggishness of the licensing process for mining operators. It takes too long for licenses to be issued, and therefore serious consideration should be given to simplifying this entire process. We are also recommending that the Ministry of Energy should consider the establishment of a national aggregates industry authority to act as an industry regulator. There is no formal regulator for the mining industry. And that is why there is so much chaos in that industry. And therefore, this committee is proposing that steps must be taken to establish a national aggregate industry authority. And finally, as a recommendation, the committee is proposing and recommending that the Ministry of Energy and Energy Industries, in collaboration with the National Quarries, should conduct a study to determine standard best practice in other countries for regulating the mining industries. Members of the media, these in essence constitute our findings, our recommendations for a more regulated mining industry, and most importantly, provide the taxpayers with the royalties that they are entitled to and the taxes they are entitled to, which they are not getting at this time because of the amount of illegal operators operating under no regulation, no control, no oversight, and the people are losing out in this process. I thank you very much, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you very much, Senator Mark. I want to just highlight a couple of things again. I think that the committee addressed the matter of the mining industry holistically. We recognize that there's challenges at the administrative level, there's challenges all the way down to the operational level, and our recommendations have covered the entire range. The obvious issue is that we are sitting in an industry and we don't understand the size of the industry, what is National Quarries share. I mean, it just doesn't make sense. And then you have a lot of illegal mining, and when the team from the Ministry of Energy came and responded to us, they essentially threw their hands in the air because it's people who can operate illegal quarries, and there's almost nothing they can do. There's almost nothing that they can do to stop them from operating illegally because the act that treated it has been sitting at the LRC apparently for some time. And that is an unsustainable thing that we can't support it. So the committee has clear recommendations on that. The other thing is that the way in which the data is captured in terms of how much actually is being produced and mined, the ministry wasn't able to give us, conclusive information that says this. We are sure about these numbers. In many cases, they're still using what's called the honor system. So I am a quarry operator. I tell you, oh, I sent out 10 dump trucks today, and that's it. And the ministry almost has to accept that because they have no way of independently verifying it. And this is a huge problem. And perhaps persons don't understand the size. I think when the TTITI, the Extractive Industries Transparency Initiative, started to look at the potential returns, it was from the quarry industry. In 1 year, I think it moved from just about a couple $100 million to over $1 billion in royalties, purely because they started to look at it. But this is a $1 billion business, and we're allowing it to sit by and be not properly regulated. So the committee is very clear. One of the key recommendations, as noted by Senator Mark, is that it needs to have a body that is overseeing this industry, somebody, some entity, whether the government, the team agrees with this recommendation or not, but our view is that holistically, there should be a group of people looking at the quarry industry. You, as a quarry operator, you must register with them. In fact, it should be a term of the license. You can't get a license unless you're a member of this body. And this is a body that is managing the industry. Let me know what your production data is. Let me know what is the state of your quarry, are you doing the proper remediation, and then feed that back to the ministry. The ministry is overburdened as it is, and trying to manage this portfolio, it has proven to be outstrip the capability of the ministry to do it effectively. And it's not their fault. It's just too much. And from where we sit, this is a $1 billion business. And we are sitting here and allowing parties are known to not provide their fair share to the citizens of Trinidad and Tobago. This committee has a clear mandate and a clear view. These assets belong to the state, and we have no problem with persons engaging in business endeavors to make a profit. But whatever is due to the state in terms of royalties, that should come to us, come to the state. I now want to thank Senator Mark for his contribution on that report, and I now quickly move to MP Fazal Karim, who will be doing a follow-up or findings on our recommendations on the follow-up report into a small company called Caribbean Airlines Limited.
Thank you very much, Mr. Chairman, and good morning to members of the media. As indicated by the Chairman, I now present to you the report on Caribbean Airlines Limited. This is a follow-up to the 5th report of the Joint Select Committee on an inquiry into the administration and operations of Caribbean Airlines Limited. Members of the media, a review of the ministerial response to the 5th report of the Joint Select Committee on State Enterprises, RE, an inquiry into the administration and operations of Caribbean Airlines Limited, received from the Ministry of Finance on November the 29th, 2017, concerned the committee as certain responses were, in our view, gravely insufficient at addressing the recommendations of the committee. It was determined by the committee that a follow-up interaction was appropriate. This was held in public hearing on March 26, 2018. We also had written submissions, which were submitted on May 11, 2018. It is important to note that the entities which appeared before the committee were as follows: Caribbean Airlines Limited, officials from the Ministry of Finance, officials from the Airports Authority of Trinidad and Tobago, and officials from the Trinidad and Tobago Civil Aviation Authority. Members of the media, the committee believes that Caribbean Airlines Limited is at an encouraging turning point in relation to its operation and management. However, more attention, in our view, must be paid to the fact that the company is a state enterprise and therefore must strictly adhere to the State Enterprises Performance Monitoring Manual in order to avoid actions that may be inimical to the best interests of the shareholder. Among the general findings were as follows. The committee considers that Caribbean Airlines' responses to certain recommendations made in its initial report, as I indicated before, were gravely insufficient. Secondly, there was also concern that the recent recruitment and selection process engaged by CAL, by Caribbean Airlines Limited, to recruit persons to its management team did not adhere to proper and established procedure. Of particular concern to us are the following. Number one, the number of new managers who are former employees of Digicel, Trinidad and Tobago, the former employer of the incumbent Chief Executive Officer at Caribbean Airlines Limited. Secondly, the fact that the incumbent CEO sat on the interview panel that interviewed persons from Digicel, which is an obvious conflict of interest and breach of good human resource practice. Thirdly, the committee felt that the evidence in terms of the terms and conditions of employment for new management positions created were not submitted to the Ministry of Finance or approved by the Cabinet's Human Resource Advisory Subcommittee. According to submissions received from the Chief Personnel Officer, dated May the 11th, 2018, Caribbean Airlines Limited, and I quote, is required to submit proposals for terms and conditions of an employment, inclusive of its senior management, to the line ministry for comments, recommendations, and subsequent onward transmission to the Human Resource Advisory Committee for determination and approval. Number four, the committee also was of the view that there was apparent intransigence during the public hearing when the significant shortcomings identified at 1, 2, and 3 above, which I just enumerated, were drawn to the attention of the management. Number five, Caribbean Airlines Limited bonus arrangements do not adhere to the stipulations of the State Enterprises Performance Monitoring Manual, which states that, and I quote, the bonus to be paid to each employee is limited to 1 month's salary annually. Payments, it continues, which do not conform to the policy requires specific approval of the Ministerial Committee for Monitoring Remuneration Arrangements. Number six, the committee, of course, continued to be concerned that critical vacancies still exist at the management level in the organization. And number seven, based on information provided to this committee, the Joint Select Committee, security background checks were not carried out on several of the new hires at Caribbean Airlines Limited, some of whom are in senior positions. This is a clear breach of CAL's own policy, which states, and I quote, all staff are subject to security checks before being hired. I'm going to make reference to this a little more in the details of recommendations. There were additional areas of concern that the committee felt it important to document. Among these are as follows. Number one, Caribbean Airlines continued employment of individuals beyond the retirement age of 60 years. Secondly, CAL's continued practice of seeking overseas pilots, as they quote, to fly in the sunny Caribbean, end of quotation, without seeming to make any effort to establish whether any local pilots could be sourced. And we gleaned this entirely from the conversations and also from the documentation which we had before the committee. And thirdly, the apparent absence of adequate succession planning for critical functions at Caribbean Airlines, such as pilots and maintenance and engineering personnel. Number 4, according to submissions received on the date which I alluded to previously, that is, the 11th of May 2018, as of the 30th of April 2018, Caribbean Airlines owed an outstanding sum of $193.2 million to the Airports Authority of Trinidad and Tobago. It is important for us to also note that this debt is currently funded by the government of Trinidad and Tobago, the state. Members of the media, despite the above concerns, according to oral submissions dated March 26, 2018, by the chairman of Caribbean Airlines Limited, the airline has acted immediately to implement several of the recommendations made by the Joint Select Committee. And although, as he indicated, there is still much to be done, Caribbean Airlines is turning the corner and has put initiatives and continues to work on a set plan centered around the airline. And this he indicated, and he described this plan as a star plan. Among the things that he followed up with in terms of his conversation about this star plan and the future of Caribbean Airlines, which is now turning the corner, as he quoted for us. Number 1, enhancing customer experience through process optimization and a comprehensive review of the customer journey, supported by the use of technology at all points. He also indicated that among those things that were in the plan were improving revenue generation, managing and reducing costs, and focusing on financial sustainability. Indeed, our committee was informed that Caribbean Airlines had its best performance since 2009 in financial year 2017-2018, despite, to our consternation, a $10 million increase in fuel costs. And of course, this is evidence that was presented to us from the management of Caribbean Airlines Limited. Additionally, members of the media, during oral submissions, the committee learned that Caribbean Airlines Limited is currently in the process of negotiating the collective agreement between Caribbean Airlines Limited and TALPA, the Airline Pilots Association, which opens a window for agreement on more suitable terms for the airline. I now come to the very critical and important aspect of the summary of recommendations. The recommendations are as follows. Number 1, the committee, our committee, the Joint Select Committee, in our recommendations, acknowledge that Caribbean Airlines has developed a strategic plan and is aggressively pursuing a specific developmental path. The committee also acknowledges the staff retention challenges that Caribbean Airlines faces and understands the rationale used to provide attractive compensation packages in order to attract and retain the most suitable employees. However, the committee emphasizes that as a state enterprise, CAL must strictly adhere to the rules and regulations that govern its operations, and particularly that in the context of a state entity. Therefore, the following recommendations are made. Number 1, that a compensation survey be conducted at Caribbean Airlines Limited to ensure suitable compensation packages are being provided to all staff, and where any adjustments are needed, the necessary approvals be sought. It is our information that a small number of persons, and I'm sure the chairman will allude to this in his comments, are receiving millions of dollars annually, and he will give you the figure in terms of compensation packages. So you will look at the ratio of the number of persons to the annual bill for payment of staff. Secondly, that the management team should practice a strict adherence to the stipulated guidelines contained, and again we reiterate, in the State Enterprises Performance Monitoring Manual. Members of the media, I come to a very important aspect of the recommendations, and one which I said I'm going to elaborate on a little bit. And that is, for all positions that were filled via any recruitment process that did not adhere to the guidelines set by the Chief Personnel Officer and which flouted the requirements for a background security check. I repeat, for a background security check, the process should be started and restarted. And that is what our committee is saying. There are persons, we were advised, who were in the employment of Caribbean Airlines Limited, for whom background checks were not done or completed. And it is this committee's recommendation that that process should be restarted. We consider that to be extremely important, particularly in terms of the billions of dollars of plant, property, and aircraft equipment, and particularly in the context in a world now which is exposed to terrorism of various types. And also to the fact that anything that may jeopardize in terms of the security check, that may jeopardize the safety, the security, and the airline's international record as a good brand, we take this very seriously. We call upon Caribbean Airlines to ensure that all the necessary background checks are done, completed. And if there are any investigations to be completed, those must be expeditiously adhered to. We do not know what could be the cause or consequence of any action that might be inimical to the airline and to its plant, its property, or its passengers. As we would have heard before, that there was a focus on customer service in terms of improving the experience at Caribbean Airlines. And we will not want to regret any situation in the future for the lapse or the lack of proper background checks. In addition to that, we recommended for salary arrangements for recent hires that were not in line with the approval process that applies to all state enterprises, the company should seek the necessary approvals for the same. Number 5, for bonus arrangements that do not adhere to the prescription of the State Enterprises Performance Monitoring Manual, they should be immediately stopped. And in some cases, we did hear about some large bonuses that were paid, and sometimes we got the impression that these were computed in residence at Caribbean Airlines Limited. But we are advising, and we strongly recommending, that all of these bonus arrangements that do not adhere to the State Enterprises Performance Monitoring Manual should be immediately stopped, and approval must be obtained from the Human Resource Advisory Subcommittee. Number 6, the entire approach to recruitment must be re-examined, given the disparity in the length of time that vacancies were advised as top senior positions were mostly advertised for 7 days, while very junior positions were advertised for twice that period of time. We wouldn't want that disparity to continue, and we want to ensure that there's a swift review of this policy and this recommendation should be adhered to as quickly as possible. And number 7, in respect of pilot hires, or for short or long-term needs, Caribbean Airlines Limited should first seek candidates from the local market before looking at international hires, particularly in the context of those who have been trained at home, who have been certified at home, but not necessarily in terms of the qualifications and the experience, because in the context of pilots, we admit and we know for a fact that some of them and many of them who are hired by Caribbean Airlines and other airlines will seek these qualifications and experiences abroad. But the priority in the context of the job market, many of pilots we have come across to see that there are many persons who have been qualified, who would have done their PPL, their private pilot license, who would have done their CPL, the commercial pilot license, who would have done extensive hours of training. Many of them continue to be unemployed. And therefore, we are making the strong recommendation that there should be an emphasis on local hires, and not only in terms of the context of the pilots, but indeed as a state entity in terms of the priority for advertising, for recruiting, for selecting and appointing nationals of Trinidad and Tobago to the National Airline of Trinidad and Tobago. I thank you very much.
Thank you very much, MP Karim, for outlining the committee's findings and recommendations on Caribbean Airlines. Members of the public, members of the media listening here, the committee had a hard time dealing with Caribbean Airlines. We found that Caribbean Airlines, we were very polite in saying that we found that their responses to us were relatively intransigent at times. We found that while we understand that you have a new management and you're trying to turn things around, there must be some difference to the rules and procedures that apply. And many times we found that their responses didn't demonstrate what we would expect from a leading, what we consider to be a leading state enterprise. The company has several challenges. Operationally, we have a particular position around hiring of local pilots as far as possible. And this goes back to the very first hearing that this committee had in sometime, I think in 2017, early 2017, where they admitted when they advertised for pilots, they got over 100 applications. At the time, they needed about 6 positions. Yet, up to just 3 or 4 weeks ago, they were advertising on the normal spaces where they advertised for captains and first officers for the 737 aircraft and to come fly in the sunny Caribbean. And they had done that just a few months, just earlier, late last year also, and then in the middle of last year. So every few months, they're advertising internationally for pilots. But I can recall not seeing any advertisement in a local newspaper asking for pilots. Is it that Trinidad and Tobago has no qualified pilots? Is that what they're saying? If that is the case, then they should say so. That is not the information that they presented to us. It's a conundrum that we just can't reconcile. The other issue at Caribbean Airlines has to do with the way in which the company is being managed. MP Karen spoke to the fact that you have an airline, security is an issue that we have to be careful how we treat it. But the company has a stated policy that every person that is employed with the company must undergo a security background check. In their submission of May 2011, they indicated that they are now conducting a review of that policy to establish which positions would need that security check. So the new management is conducting a review of that. We are not in the daily operations. But at the point in time when the new positions were hired, the old policy or the existing policy would have been in effect. So they have flouted their own policy and hired persons adverse to their own policies. And we've recommended simply you need to restart that process. As someone would say, you sit in an aircraft and you just assume that everything in the background works and that all of the checks have been done. And we've looked at their submission that they have a view about persons who are not interacting on the aircraft or on the ramp. And I'm saying if somebody's in IT, working in IT in the head office, does it mean that they have no impact on the aircraft operations? We are not sure about that. So if in their review we are waiting to hear what their review of what positions require a background security check. We are very interested to understand that. From where we stand, you hired persons in violation of your own policy, that process has to be restarted. Let them work out the mechanics for that, because they have no excuse. They have a policy stated, and they went adverse to it. We have no record of any board decision that it is fine to hire persons in that situation. The other thing I want to point out is that Caribbean Airlines still has a challenge in terms of what we consider to be over 60 pilots in particular. You know, we've hit that subject several times. The process is, as a pilot, you achieve the age of 60, you collect all your pension benefits, and then you continue to work at the highest salary that you've ever earned. That's simply unfair. If you ask persons in Trinidad and Tobago who are looking for a job now, people are struggling to get work, yet you have persons earning 2 sets of income streams from one state company. How can that be something that we advertise and sustain? And particularly when you look at the salary profile Caribbean Airlines, as alluded to by MP Karim, you probably have over 40 people earning in excess of $1 million a year. And if Caribbean Airlines were turning a regular profit, we'd be fine. What is happening is that you have a situation where the taxpayers of Trinidad and Tobago are supporting the running of Caribbean Airlines and so paying people millions of dollars a year. And we have no problem people earning well. But you need to be operating profitably and provide returns to the state. And until such time as you do that, some frugality is required. You have people earning from 1 million up to almost 2 million a year. And something is fine when you're running a business and you want to, I think the quote was, if you want to attract the best, you have to pay the best. Okay, but if you, in attracting the best and paying the best, you want the best performance also. Where's that part of it? We have no problem with you want to attract the best and pay the best, but we want the best performance. So that until I get the best performance, something is wrong. The company needs to have a different focus on understanding, 1, we're a state enterprise. 2, we are here to provide returns to the people of Trinidad and Tobago. 3, because we are being funded by the state in large part to keep us alive. If without state funding, Caribbean Airlines would not be able to survive. We have to apply some frugality to how we operate. That should be something burning right in front of all of the managers, right in front of them every day. But on the basis of what we've seen, particularly when it came to the hearing and we outlined some of our concerns, the tone of the response was not what we were expecting. The committee was taken aback. There was no attempt to say to the committee, we recognize that these concerns are valid. Instead, essentially, we're doing a business, we're running a business, we're trying to run a business, and we're trying to run a business. Just interesting. So as I close on my comments, there's one other thing I wanted to note, the whole issue of how HR is managed in the company. The company advertises several positions, like chief information officer, chief financial officer, very senior positions paying $70,000 or $80,000 a month, but you advertise for this position for 7 days. But you're applying for counter attendance at the airport, you're advertising for 2 to 3 weeks in the newspaper. I just saw a couple of weeks ago they're advertising for flight attendants. That ad probably ran for over 2 weeks. But for very high-ranking, senior, high-paying positions, the advertisements ran online only for 7 days. So something we are not sure if that is an appropriate practice. But when you advertise for flight attendants in the daily newspapers, it's a half-page ad, clearly visible to anybody who has any interest in being in that field of work can easily find out about it. And even if they don't see someone who may think that they have an interest would see it for them. But when you run advertisements online only in a closed circle for 7 days, we are not comfortable with that. That is a process that a state enterprise should be engaging in. We're not comfortable with that at all. So I now want to open the floor to questions and comments from the member of media. The entire panel is very comfortable with all of the comments and recommendations inside of this report, and we are here to take your questions.
Before we take questions, I'd just like to remind the members of the media, please state your name and what media house you represent. Also, we only have time for a few questions because we have to, in short time, prepare for the sitting of the House. Thank you.
Good morning, Fane Richards from TV6. I will try to stick to a few brief questions, although given the breadth of what was said, I have many. Just to clarify, in asking for the process to be restarted with respect to the security checks, is it that you, in tandem, expect some kind of freeze on the continued employment of people who were hired without the background check, or are you asking for the check to just be restarted as they are continuing in the airline's employ?
Let me start by saying, Ms. Richards, thank you for your question. The Caribbean Airlines policy, as it stands now, states that all employees must undergo a background security check before they are hired. Before. Caribbean Airlines has gone against their own policy. The committee has said you need to restart the process, the entire recruitment process. If whatever is required on Caribbean Airlines to manage that is why you have a management. We are not in the business of managing the airline. We're in the business of making sure that people apply the rules that are required. They follow the State Enterprises Performance Monitoring Manual. And in this case, you're an airline. You have a security policy. You have flouted your own security policy. So we are allowing the management the maximum flexibility to restart the process. The mechanics for that is completely up to the management and board of Caribbean Airlines.
So in saying the entire recruitment process, that person can remain on board?
I am not saying that. We are saying that we are allowing the management of Caribbean Airlines to figure that out. Because we, as a committee, are uncomfortable with people working at the airline being hired, some of them being only, the advertisement was only for 7 days. You have situations where someone, within 7, let's say it was advertised on the 14th of the month, it was completed on the 21st of the month, and 2 weeks later the person was working at the company. So we are trying to figure out, whoa, that was really fast. We love efficiency. We really like efficiency, but some things require a proper process, and we're not sure, we're not convinced, and we are concerned. So our position is that in terms of security, perhaps a little more time is better than going through what we consider to be, may have been, a rushed process. Okay. Certainly.
Can I just intervene here to say that when we had the hearing with Caribbean Airlines, this was a matter that was brought up with them. So it is not something that we are saying today only. They were well aware of it. They were reminded of what they were supposed to do. And I believe they had sufficient time to ensure that the background checks were completed. They should indicate to the committee who are those persons or what are those positions for which background checks are still pending and whether they are on the job. Because we would not like to think that if anything happens untoward on the compound or in the air, that we would lament that this may have been one of the opportunities caused as a result of not doing or not having these background checks. In any event, as the chairman indicated, if you go to work anywhere else in Trinidad and Tobago, before they hire you, they'll call other people. They'll find out, they'll get reports. Why is it not a situation like this, particularly in a situation where hundreds of millions, billions of dollars are invested by the taxpayers in our national airline?
Did the committee endeavor to find out whether the lack of background checks breached international aviation regulations?
We, as a committee, were not able to verify that because our take on it had to do with Caribbean Airlines has a policy. I am sure that the policy wasn't pulled out of the thin air. Something would have guided their policy. Their policy is simple. All employees must undergo a background check, not checking your references. There's levels. Calling your previous employers, that's fine. Background security check on your who you are, who you interact with. That type of security check must be done for all employees before they are hired. Before. They send us a list of persons for whom they did not conduct that check. So we couldn't reconcile your policy with your actions. We couldn't.
2 more questions.
Certainly.
The honor system sounds as though it still prevails in terms of wanting them to restart, wanting them to stop the bonuses. What enforcement options are available, even if it's beyond the scope of the committee, to ensure that CAL follows these recommendations?
As we recommended, all the issues around bonuses and salaries, there's a process that is clearly outlined in the State Enterprises Performance Manual. And all we recommend is that they go back to that process. For those bonuses that fall outside of the scope of the approval, which it says for bonuses, I think it's 1 month per year. Any bonus that you've negotiated, arranged, or contracted with someone else, seek the approval. Because we can't sit here as a committee and be comfortable, but we have a rule book. the rule book says this. This is what we work with. You as a state enterprise, you have the same rule book, and you decide to do something else.
But you're hoping that they act in good faith because you've said
we
act.
hope that they act in good faith. And how this process works is that once this report is laid in, it has already been laid in the lower house and upper house. It will be transmitted to the management of Caribbean Airlines through their line ministry. And then they have 60 days to come back to the committee and tell us. So this process doesn't end. There's a loop so that we will be able to find out in 60 days of time, give or take, what they've done with respect to these recommendations. If they've done nothing, or let's say, for example, the line ministry says we give them covering approval that backdates all of these things, but that's fine. We don't know. We can't predict what will happen. All we said is this is what we'd like to see happen, and allow Caribbean Airlines to have a discussion with its line ministry in terms of how they could treat with it.
And finally, sorry, go ahead.
Let me just indicate that we see this as being something that can be quickly adhered to. The reason is very simple, that the State Enterprise Performance Monitoring Manual comes out and has the jurisdiction. It's responsibility out of the Ministry of Finance. And the Minister of Finance is the line minister for Caribbean Airlines Limited.
And finally, it sounds as though the state is proverbially shooting itself in the foot when you look at Magdalena Grand operating on a loss since inception and National Quarries owing a cumulative $48 million and spending 3+ decades not fulfilling its mandate. One, did the committee get the impression that there's some level of comfort with the status quo, considering how long it's persisted? And two, what are your concrete recommendations for the state to recoup some of this money, considering the economic situation?
Well, let me put on the public record that the committee was actually heartened by the efforts being undertaken by the current board of the National Quarries Company Limited. We recognize that the board and some of the members of the management now have started to apply some core business principles in terms of how they operate, apply some rigor to the way in which they do things. So we were heartened by many of the responses we received and the assurances we received from both the chairman of the board and the members of the board present and the management. And similarly with TecK, we found that the responses that we got were along the lines of this. We understand we have challenges. We're working through these challenges. We'd appreciate the committee's support in terms of any guidance the committee could give us in terms of how we could improve the operations of the company. We didn't get that from all entities, but at least we were pleased that the members of the board of National Quarries and TecK were clearly demonstrating they understand that they have a remit to manage state resources in the best way possible. And with particular issues around how the outstanding royalties that have been owed by National Quarries. It's difficult to have a state company owing royalties to the state when the state is working very hard to collect royalties from international companies who in the energy sector in another part of the business. So that at least for the optics, we recommended work out a payment plan. Go to the ministry and say, listen, this is the total quantum of royalties, and let's have our view that they can work out a payment schedule that says by the end of 2020, we would have cleared the arrears. Some arrangement along those lines. As National Quarries is currently constructed and operating, it's impossible for them to pay that in a lump in any near period of time. So we've recommended that they engage with the ministry to have a plan that can address the arrears, that everyone can see, or at least they can see, this is the plan. By the end of X period, we expect to have cleared the arrears.
MP Karim, sorry. My name is Leo Sorayas. I'm from the Trinidad Express newspapers. You outlined that a number of new managers who were former employees of Digicel are now employed at CAL. Can you give us a figure?
I think it's about either 11 or 12, somewhere around there. We could give you the exact figure. We can also give you the positions because it was in the public domain, and they answered over here right when we had
the secretariat team will be
so
able to
I think it has to be in the vicinity of 11 or 12 persons.
Okay, and were these employees, these Digicel employees, identified among the employees who did not undergo the required background checks?
I think from the evidence we have, some of them, their background checks were not completed. And as I indicated before, what we want to do is to get an updated response as to which positions are still outstanding, and maybe reasons for it, because we would have met at least about 6 weeks ago, minimum.
Good morning, Rhonda Dowlat from the Trinidad Guardian. Chairman, in terms of, we're hearing about flouting policies and procedures not being followed. We're hearing about losses generally in all state enterprises. What does the committee recommend in terms of holding these public officials accountable?
Well, that is the million-dollar question, Ms. Dowlat. If the committee had the power, the authority to hold persons accountable, I am sure myself and my colleagues under the table, we would certainly be cracking that whip. What we can do, and what the committee is endeavoring to do, is to put as much information in the public domain as possible about the operations of these companies. What has been happening over, we have to remember, this didn't start last week. For a long time, companies have been able to engage in practices that are not the best, but it's been under the radar. But now, because of the increased focus on the activities of these companies through this joint select committee process, we are at least now putting it in the public domain about some of these practices that have been under the radar. My good colleague here, Senator Mark, will probably would love to add something to that, because that is the part of the strength of what we're doing. There would have been a time that these committees would have done reports, and reports have been filed, and we end up lodged in the library of the Parliament, and that essentially would have been the end of the process. Now we have another stage where after the process is done, which is why we have a follow-up report on Caribbean Airlines. We did a report on them, we made recommendations. As you would be well aware, their response to some of our recommendations was one word: noted. That we felt was, essentially a disrespectful response from a first-line state enterprise. They didn't feel so. They didn't agree. So this is where we spoke about intransigence. But because of the process of after 60 days, you have to come back to tell us where you are with our implementation of the recommendations. It allows us now to understand what you're doing with our recommendations. So because we've seen that you've not been dealing with some of our recommendations, we've called you back in again. So it's going to be an iterative process that allows for entities to understand that, okay, if you're not working steadfastly towards implementation of the recommendations of the committee will bring you back to ask you simply one question: what is the status of the implementation of the recommendations? And you will sit in front of the TV cameras and your good selves and tell the people of Trinidad and Tobago why you're not acting on recommendations. That is a powerful tool in our respectful view that allows for persons who are accountable for state resources to be able to have to say something about what they're doing with those state resources. I think Senator Mark indicated he wants to say something.
Yeah. We have to decide among ourselves as members of a committee to consider advancing to the Parliament the need to translate the state enterprises monitoring manual into a legal instrument with appropriate sanctions and penalties imposed for violation or breaches. That is an area that this committee will have to consider at the appropriate time and submit a recommendation. We will also have to consider whether the standing orders of the Parliament ought to be changed so that when we find adverse findings and we come across inappropriate conduct and behavior, if it requires the Parliament to have the matter referred to the Director of Public Prosecutions, that is another area that the committee at some future time could consider. So that, as you have asked, Mrs. Dowlat, the whole question about holding people to account for public resources, because the Parliament, of which we are members, we are the ones who approve all the funding, all the allocations to these state enterprises. And that is why, under the Constitution, they are accountable to the Parliament. And therefore, we must be able to come up with appropriate recommendations for implementation by the government as it relates to violation and breaches. Finally, I'd like to say this. It is the height of recklessness and irresponsibility for any CEO of any state enterprise, and more so an airline, where passenger safety and security and the well-being of those citizens supposed to be your number one priority, to indicate that you have not effected the policy that has been there for so many decades. This gentleman arrived on the compound of this airline a short while ago, and he has already begun to ignore and violate and breach a number of its policies, as we have outlined earlier. But one of the most egregious offenses that a management can commit against the citizenry is the one that we have outlined. You cannot, in 2018, ignore security in a world where we have experienced acts of terrorism. And for a company CEO to do so, it is the height of reckless conduct and behavior. And this CEO ought to be taken to task on this particular point. We feel very strongly about this matter, and we'll have more to say on this matter in the coming period.
Chair, if I may.
MP, certainly.
Just for information, this committee is not about cracking a whip behind a state entities. It's actually trying to make sure the entities fall in line within a certain policy and process. We have seen where persons that run these entities would have strayed a bit for whatever reason, and it's our responsibility to ensure that the purpose of the entity, if you listen to how Mr. Mark would have introduced when he read out his stuff, he would have indicated the purpose of the company. So sometimes, in excitement to get certain things done, they lose focus of what the purpose and the processes are, and it's our responsibility to ensure that they follow this. So I would say, though, as the chairman said, some of the entities have been making changes and are trying to comply with our recommendations. And we're giving them a timeline in which we await, and we hope to get something positive.
Thank you very much. Anyone else? I just want to say that Caribbean Airlines, again, is an entity that the committee has found to be very tough to deal with, hard work. We believe that a strong national airline, a profitable national airline, is what every citizen would love to see. We'd love to see Caribbean Airlines flying, being profitable, and probably growing. That is what we want. But it's difficult to see that happening when you have a process to follow in terms of simple things, just recruitment. It is unbelievable that we have here on the public record that the current CEO sat on the interview panel for senior positions, and he knew the person's being interviewed, and sat here and told us that and seemed fine with it. And so that if the powers that be are okay with that, then the committee almost has nothing we could do about it. But in any other entity, that shouldn't happen. There was no qualifying statement other than, well, whatever he said. And we found out that we were troubled. We're not saying right about calling right, we're just troubled because in a world where we operate here now, about, as they're saying about, it's not what you do, and sometimes it's how you do it. And perhaps if you wanted to engage persons who you knew were good people from Digicel, at least you should have had a duty of care to make sure the process was clean, that your fingerprints weren't on the process. That is just our thinking. Instead, it seemed rather cavalier in the way in which it was done, and that is what concerned the company, concerned the committee, because we want Caribbean Airlines to be successful. We want Caribbean Airlines to be profitable. We want Caribbean Airlines to be returning checks to the Ministry of Finance every year. Here's our profits back to the state, that the state can apply to other things that it needs to do. So we remain hopeful that Caribbean Airlines will turn around. They have to fix the administrative problems. They have to understand that they are a state enterprise, and you have to adhere to the rules and procedures in all the things that you do. You have to be frugal, demonstrate frugality in the way in which you work, because you're losing money. And if it weren't for the injections of funds to the state is financing the debt of Caribbean Airlines, you wouldn't be able to operate. So that should be something that should be right in front of you if you're managing the enterprise, and apply some rigor to that. That's all the committee is saying. Any more questions? Good. Beautiful.
Well, at this time, we'd like to say, first of all, thank you to the members of the media who came out. Thank you to the committee members who came to update us on the findings of the committee's reports. And also thank you to the members of the public who are tuned in on Parliament Channel 11, Parliament Radio 105.5 FM, and also on our YouTube channel, ParlView. At this time, we have come to the end of today's press conference, and we return to our regular programming. Thank you.
This has been a presentation of the Parliament Channel on Parliament Radio 105.5 FM.